Over the span of rap history, we have heard many compelling stories through music throughout the years. Listeners have questioned if some of these stories are falsified altogether, actually happened, but fabricated, or the real deal. Sometimes stories come and go like the seasons, but with this story we'll be talking about shortly is over 20 years old and has etched its place in rap history. A story that left people in suspense for years, wondering who was Biggie talking about on the song and who the story was about. People turn into detectives to put together some of the context clues in the song to solve the mystery. By 2022, the mystery has been solved, but today I'll take you on the journey through this classic tale. But before I get more into the video, I would first like to thank you guys for coming to see this, because you guys can be doing a million other things right now, but instead you're here with me and I appreciate that. If you guys like the content, you guys should like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Also, follow my Instagram too, that would be greatly appreciated. Comment down below your story of what it was like trying to figure out who the story was about and who you initially thought the player was. Comment down below some other songs with great stories that I should maybe cover in the future as well. Also, let me know where you are tuning in from as well. Represent where you're from. Alright, without further ado, let's get into the video. The year is 1997, and as we know, Biggie would sadly pass away in March of that year. Literally a couple of weeks after this, Biggie would posthumously release Life After Death, and the album peaked at #1 on the Billboard 200, selling 690,000 copies in its first week. However, on this album, the 12th track on the first disc of the album would be I Got a Story to Tell. Biggie starts off the song asking who is y'all talking to, which is actually real because he saw the studio engineers talking but couldn't see anyone else in the control room. They were actually talking to Diddy, who Biggie kicked out of the studio earlier because Diddy is known to be a perfectionist and in a way is overbearing in the studio. This take was from a different song, and the person Puff was talking to was Jay-Z when this happened. Despite getting kicked out though, Diddy snuck back into the control room and hid behind some speakers while still directing the engineers. Like, you cannot make this stuff up. But then Biggie goes, "This here goes out to all the dudes that be effing mad girls and other dudes' cribs, thinking stuff is sweet." Biggie would then start his first verse by saying, "I kicked flows for you, kicked down doors for you, even left all my girls for you." Biggie then describes this girl as petite with the big booty and she's official. He then talks about how the girl is pushing the double O with the 5 in the front, which is in reference to the Mercedes-Benz SL 500 1996 model, and Biggie doesn't believe that it's hers. He then decides that he is interested in finding out more about her and her nice car and decides to peel off to her place. He then questions if this car is stolen. Biggie then goes into this female's house and notices how many televisions and the numerous amounts of Versace that were around. He follows this up by saying that this girl is messing with a player on the New York Knicks. Biggie then says whoever this is, he's tricking, and the interior of the house is plush, but the girl was also stressing Biggie out because she seemed to be in a rush. The girl and Biggie proceed to do the deed, if you know what I mean, and Biggie is, for lack of a better phrase, in her guts while this Knicks player is playing against the Utah Jazz. After they're done doing the deed, Biggie would roll up a blunt, but suddenly he would hear "Honey, I'm Home." Of course, this catches Biggie off guard, and he tries to get the girl to talk to this guy before Biggie has to, in his words, put a spark to him. In the meantime, for a distraction, the girl tells her man to bring her up a drink, which gave Biggie more time to think. Biggie devises a plan and told the girl to give him a scarf, pillowcase, and rope. Now, I remember when I first heard this song, and I thought that Biggie was going to try and rope down from the bedroom to the ground, like outside, like, which is like, that is like a hilarious thought in my head. Like, But he obviously didn't use those items for that. And instead, he tied the scarf around his face, tied the girl up, and gagged her mouth with a pillowcase. The man then walks upstairs and Biggie points a gun at him and ends up robbing him. The man had 100 cash, but then pulled money out of the floor and put money in a Prada knapsack, and Biggie hit the door. Before he does this, he brings the story back to the beginning as he mentions that he ended up taking the keys to the 5, which is the car I was talking about earlier. Biggie then calls his friends and tells them bring the weed because he has a story to tell. Now this concludes the only verse in the song, and now we enter the outro where we get more bits and pieces of the story when Biggie is talking to his friends. Biggie is breaking down the story and talks about how he's messing with the chick who messes with the player from the Knicks. His friend then asks Biggie who is it, but Biggie says he doesn't know, but says it was one of them 6'5" dudes. Biggie continues the story by saying that the reason why this Knicks player was there was probably because his game got rained out, which doesn't make any sense at all. But Biggie admits the guy had him scared, but Biggie remembered that he had a gun on him. Then he goes down talking about how he tied the girl up and pulled the gun on the guy, and Biggie's friends chime in and says that he told Biggie that the girl was shiesty and that he used to mess with her cousin. They laugh about it, and Biggie ends with him talking about how he put the cash in the Prada knapsack and he was gone. Now this song was released in 1997, but March of 1997 to be specific, which gives us a cutoff date to when these events occurred, especially since Biggie dies before the song officially ever came out, technically. This gives fans a timeline at least from 1994 to early 1997 to when these events could have occurred, with 1994 being the release of Biggie's debut album. I think it's obvious this story didn't occur before then, but the song left people with other clues, with the major one being the guy in question was a player from the Knicks. Not only was he a player from the Knicks, but he was also about 6'5". In the song, Biggie said that this occurred while the player was playing against the Utah Jazz, in which the internet, now knowing the player in question, has came to the conclusion that this took place either on January 14th, 1995 or November 12th, 1995. Both games, I believe, were home games for the Knicks. Now, the common player people believed for years that Biggie was talking about was John Starks. Now, I looked up Biggie's height, and it seems that he was around 6'2", and Biggie said that the guy was around 6'5". Now, I just flat out Googled what was John Starks' height, and on Google, it will say 6'5", but I went on Basketball Reference and looked up what was his height, and at least from 1994 to 1997, all of them in the rosters and stuff said that he was 6'3". Side note, my man John Starks did not play in the January game, and he also went 1 for 9 from the field with 2 points. Did get 3 rebounds, 5 assists, and 1 steal on 31 minutes played with the loss. But just imagine that, let's say it was John Starks, and this man just came home from a bad game, and a man who was Biggie robs him. That's a wild story. Even though we know that part of the story is probably exaggerated, but it still is a funny thought though. Still a funny thought. But he did well in that November game with 26 points, and the Knicks won that game. Now Jadakiss, who had a relationship with Biggie before he passed, because Jadakiss was/is a member of the Locks, and they were signed to Bad Boy at a point in time, but Biggie wouldn't even tell him who it was, and this is what Jadakiss had to say about it in 2014. Big wouldn't tell me. I was doing my own investigation. He was saying 6'5", trying to figure out what Nick was 6'5". He threw you off though, because he also said rained out. A basketball game can't get rained out. So Big was trying to mess with you a little bit on there too. At the time, Jadakiss was on the show Highly Questionable, and besides John Starks, Jada said that he came to the conclusion that it was either Anthony Mason, Larry Johnson, or maybe Derek Harper. He follows it up by saying that it could have been anybody on that team because those were some crazy Knicks back then. Now this Jadakiss interview was released in October of 2014, but the month before that, in September, John Starks was interviewed on the show Highly Questionable as well. John was asked about was the song I Got a Story to Tell about him, and he said that it wasn't. He said that he wasn't 6'5" and is instead 6'2". He said he knew who the story was about, but wouldn't say. He said he didn't know if it truly happened, how it happened, but he had heard some things, and he said he never met Biggie. But going back to Jadakiss' list of other people who the song could have been about, and Anthony Mason is listed around 6'7", Larry Johnson is listed around 6'6", and Derek Harper is listed around 6'4". Now in 2016, Fat Joe, who also had a relationship with Biggie, was on the show Highly Questionable, and he was asked about who the song was about. Fat Joe said he didn't want to be disrespectful, but the song was about Anthony Mason. Fat Joe said that rap is entertainment, so sometimes people stretch the truth and change things up. Fat Joe said that he had heard that it was about Anthony Mason. Fat Joe has gone on record and said that he regrets revealing that because he didn't think that it was his place to say that. He didn't regret it, but Fat Joe has actually talked about how he had a relationship with Anthony Mason actually. Now, some people throughout all of the years before this had come to the conclusion that it was him, but obviously to finally hear who the story was allegedly about from someone like Fat Joe, who was big to like a lot of people, like it was just crazy. I think that it's bittersweet to finally know who the song is about, because I mean, like, yeah, like it's cool to finally figure out who the song is about after all these years, but I think that the mystery of not knowing who it was about and keeping people guessing is also good. The player in question, being Anthony Mason, makes sense because he's above 6'5" and did play on the Knicks from 1991 to 1996, which fits into our timeline. The sad thing is that Anthony Mason would pass away in February of 2015, which means that the story was confirmed after his death. Definitely want to give a big rest in peace to Anthony Mason. And like, of course, like want to give a big rest in peace to Biggie as well, because they're both no longer with us. I know that Charles Oakley, who had played on the Knicks with Anthony Mason, thought that what Fat Joe did was disrespectful, and he said that he knew Fat Joe and that Joe was a nice guy, but Charles Oakley said that he played with Anthony Mason and he always has his back. He followed it up by saying that Biggie also ain't here to tell the real truth. Well, we would get further confirmation from Diddy himself on The Breakfast Club that the story was in fact about Anthony Mason. Also, I wonder what that girl, like who like the story is about, is thinking right now. If she's still alive, I don't really know, because she's a part of hip hop history. Like, it's just super crazy, and there's always two sides to a story. All in all, let me know what you thought of the video. Should I continue this series of where I break down stories and songs? And definitely let me know of future potential video ideas. But like, I wanted to just kick off the series with the classic. I love you guys with all my heart. Peace.